We'll call the hearing to order. Good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a good trip. The sun is shining. Can't complain. So, our first bill is SB 227. Senator Regina Birdsall, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. For the record, my name is Senator Regina Birdsall. I represent the towns of Derry, Hampstead, and Windham, and I am the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 227, which is basically death benefits for first responders who die from suicide. This was a bill that we've been working on. I chaired the commission on PTSD in first responders. This is one that we had worked on last year. This is one of the topics we had worked with some of the first responders last year. And this bill is primarily a result of that commission. And I know there isn't the amount of money that would be spent is, to me, not a lot when you consider the lives of our first responders, as well as what we did. We amended it in the Senate to include our corrections officers in there. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Senator Birdsall. I needed a pen. Okay. We now call on David Goldstein.
Good morning, Madam Chair. With your permission, I'll bring my colleagues with me
Sure.
in the interest of time, etc. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Goldstein. I'm the Chief of Police in the City of Franklin. I've been chief there for 13 years. I've been I've been a chief for 18 years in a former jurisdiction, and I've been a police officer for more than 42 years. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with my pedigree, other than to tell you that I have an extensive research, experiential, and academic experience in this area. I do chair the legislative committee for the New Hampshire Association of Chiefs of Police, and we are in favor of this bill, SB 227FN. Very briefly, both research and clinical experience dictate the fact that there is a definite nexus between and among the stress, crisis, and trauma that all first responders experience and the suicide among our brothers and sisters. At present, in law enforcement, for example, we estimate a 1 to 4.5 ratio of line of duty deaths to suicidal deaths in police work. In other words, for every one line of duty death in police work, there's at least 4.5, and I'm not sure how we rationalize the half, but there's at least 4.5 police officers that will die by their own hand. There is a lack of analog in other professions for this. It's important to note that we are unaware of any suicide, and I, in being involved in this work for over 40 years, I'm unaware of any suicide among any first responder as a cash incentive to kill him or herself. I understand that this is a fiscal note. We don't have an amount. We hope that we never will have an amount, but should we feel that this is the right thing to do for the survivors of anyone who does kill themselves as a member of the first responder family. With that.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, just as a means of introduction, my name is Justin Breton. I'm the Mental Health and Wellness Coordinator for the Manchester, New Hampshire Police Department. I'm here this morning on behalf of the New Hampshire Police Association to echo the sentiments and support that Chief Goldstein just laid out for you for SB 227FN. I am the Mental Health and Wellness Coordinator for the Manchester Police Department, and Chief Goldstein and I co-coordinate the New Hampshire Peer Support Network that we are working diligently to create.
Excuse me. You have to speak into the microphone because it is being the outside world can't hear you. So
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the
thank you very
clarification.
much.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So as I was saying, we are here today to voice our support for this bill. Unequivocally, we hope that we will never have to substantiate a cost to the state. The first responder community, to include corrections officers, are working diligently day in and day out to make sure that we're providing our personnel with the training and resources available to be able to mitigate this concern. But as a culture and as a state, we are playing catch up. We have to do a better job of making sure that we are taking care of those who take care of others. And this is a very important first step in that process. So I'd like to thank you all for your time and consideration. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
In fact, we invite questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Representative Murray?
Thank you. What is your name again?
My name is Justin Breton, Breton.
Madam Chair, I should have done this at the beginning. I do have some information for the committee.
Okay, if you would pass it to Mr. Hoffman, who's behind you, he'll take care of it. Thank you. Representative Burrs?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. Chief Goldstein, a question for you.
Yes.
You mentioned a ratio of 1 to 4, 4.5.
Yes.
The numbers you gave us are for people who are actively on duty. Is there a ratio when people are retired? Because the reason I ask that is for the VA, for example, as time progresses, as veterans age, it becomes more of an issue.
I wish that there were, Representative. The sad thing is that we do not know what's happening among our retired individuals other than through anecdote. There's actually very little research in the area. There may be some clinical information available to us, but on a death certificate, it doesn't say died by suicide because he was a cop, so to speak. And we don't know. We suspect it's a very large number. But again, I can't give you a definitive answer. I wish I could.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I keep the dog?
Representative Steve Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of Finance, for allowing me to speak in front of you today. This is a very personal bill for me, and I'll get into a little bit as briefly as to why that is. Along with Senator Birdsell, I also sit on the state's PTSD Commission, and we have been working diligently every month for quite some time on this topic. The reason that this bill in particular is so personal to me is that I have two working partners that have committed suicide. Now, working partners, right? So I've been in the fire service for 27 years. I've been a Manchester Fire lieutenant and been on Manchester Fire for the last 18 years. I've also served in the town of Raymond in New Hampshire. And the rarity of these events are, thank God they are as rare as they are, but to have two working partners go through this it's unusual for someone to have one that did it, much less two. They were for certainly different reasons, different background situations, but one of the things that unfortunately is difficult in the first responder world, as with a lot of things, it's cumulative. So you have horrific situations that occur, and everyone handles those differently, and you can have situations over your career that happened a decade ago and all of a sudden they just pop up. So this is not always just a simple causal relationship in the sense of X happened, Y occurred, and Z was the end result. It almost never works out that way. So one of the things that, as you are the finance committee, we do have a peculiar fiscal note here in that hopefully nothing ever happens and we pay $0. But the reality is that's probably not the case. And, we really should look at the holistic situation here with that. $100,000 line of duty death benefit in this particular case is relatively peanuts, considering that all of the folks that are involved in this are in the state pension system. And having been on eDNA for a couple of terms and having that as kind of one of the major things that we tackle in eDNA, I can tell you that without getting into any of the math and the formulas and the weeds of this, that for the family of the person that goes through this is a substantial financial loss to them to lose someone who's in the state pension system that commits suicide, because this has long-term ramifications the way the pension's adjusted for survivors. And I know that was mentioned by the two gentlemen that were here prior, and I really do want to harp on that in the fact that there really truly is zero financial incentive for this. It's really a financial train wreck for those that are left behind. So, not getting into too much of the policy, I just, like I said, with you being finance, I really do want to harp on that. But I also do want to plug the commission a little bit further here in the sense that all of the aspects of this have been looked at by the commission. We've dived into this from angles that I didn't even think were part of this, and having a group that is made up of folks from everything from the insurance carriers to healthcare to social, certainly the legislative side of this. We've looked at this from many different angles, and it really truly is a very complex situation. So, that's something the commission is really handling, and you folks are here to decide whether or not that the Senate was right in passing this in essence. So I ask for your support for this. I certainly encourage any of you, if you have specific questions, to reach out to anyone that's on the commission. And we would be certainly able to either answer it for you or get you to the right person that specializes in what your concern is. So I thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anybody? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam
Representative
Chair.
Pearson. I now call on Mr. John Mcallister. Good morning.
Just once? Perfect. There we go. You can all hear me now? I apologize for that. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to testify in support of Senate Bill 227. For the record, my name is John Mcallister, and I serve as the Secretary-Treasurer of the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire, and I'm a 22-year member of the City of Nashua Fire Department. The Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire have submitted written testimony this morning, so that's being handed out as we speak. As a leading firefighter organization in New Hampshire, the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire advocates for the health and safety of the brave men and women who protect the citizens of this great state. In the fire service, we are routinely called to scenes of catastrophic incidents involving severe injuries, tragic loss of human life, and property loss. It is well documented that the effects of these exposures over time may result in psychological injuries and even suicide. Tragically, we continue to see too many of our brothers and sisters lose their battles with post-traumatic stress disorder. Oftentimes, this results in an increase in harmful behaviors, including substance abuse, self-harm, or suicide. We face the harsh reality that despite our best efforts at awareness and prevention, or despite our attempts to provide a listening ear, or helping hand, or a shoulder to cry on, there are simply more instances where we are unable to make the save of our own members. It is in these instances that our responsibility then turns to the families of the loved ones. These are the families who are left in the wake of a disaster that is so unimaginable that it turns their lives upside down. They are mourning the loss of their loved one while also wondering how they will pay the mortgage or put food on their table. These are the very same families who supported their loved one throughout the many nights, weekends, holidays that they worked away from home, many times 24 to 48 hours straight. These are the very same families who laid awake at night wondering if their loved one would make it home from their last shift. And these are the very same families who watched their loved one grow distant and detached as they silently fought their battle with depression or PTSD. We owe it to these families to help provide some level of dignity and relief in their life. And while it won't bring their loved ones back, it will help to ensure their families can begin to heal. The leaders of the professional firefighters in New Hampshire vow to continue our fight to educate our members, to reduce the stigma surrounding behavioral health, and to do whatever we can to help prevent any further loss of life of this devastating illness. Until such time that we can win this fight, we ask the committee to support Senate Bill 227. I thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
I now call on Lynn Cusack.
Good morning, Madam Chair,
Good morning.
members of the committee. My name is Lynn Marie Kuzak, and I am an attorney with the Department of Corrections. My job over there is the Director of Professional Standards. In that role, I see the work that our corrections officers do on a daily basis and the struggles that many of them have with depression, stress, and anxiety related to the jobs that they hold. Some of you have recently been on tours of our facilities and have witnessed firsthand what it is like inside one of our facilities. But what you don't understand is that day-to-day role that our corrections officers and our corrections line staff play in those facilities, where we have, for example, in our men's facility, gang wars. We have what we call the security threat groups or gangs that try to bring contraband into the facilities, that contraband being drugs. And there's wars over who is going to make the most money off of selling those drugs. And those wars sometimes turn violent. And our corrections officers have to deal with those violent activities that occur in the facility on a daily basis. One of the things that we see in the corrections field is, and studies have shown, and the testimony that I've just handed out to you has links to some of this testimony or the studies that have been done, show that corrections officers have a higher rate or a higher incidence of depression and anxiety and suicide than that of the local law enforcement police officers. One study shows that anxiety and stress or post-traumatic stress syndrome is at about 53% of corrections officers, where it's 30-some% for police officers. And suicides are 6% higher than the average in the general population. We don't see suicides occurring in our population, our staff population, but if it occurs and the anxiety and the stress that occurs, if it happens, we think that our corrections officers and our probation and parole officers should have the same advantage, or their families have the same advantage that other law enforcement in the state of New Hampshire do have when it comes to taking care of their families as a result of a suicide that occurs because of death a suicide that occurs because of the stress that occurs resulting from the job. Another interesting point that I would like to make, and I've testified in the Senate on this, that there is an Officer Down Memorial page that shows you on an annual basis the number of law enforcement that are killed in the line of duty or take their own life by suicide. And the numbers are sort of striking in that in 2015, 167 individuals nationwide in law enforcement were killed in the line of duty. 6 of those were corrections officers, and 50% of those that were killed by assault. Now, the bill not only for corrections officers allows the the suicide to be incorporated in the death benefit, but it for the first time allows corrections officers to also be included in any death benefit. And what we're also proposing is that we include the probation and parole officers who on a daily basis are out on the streets working with those felons that still have sentences remaining. That same page that I was talking about, the Officer Down Memorial page, shows that in 2017 there were 186 deaths in law enforcement. 9 of them were, this was 2017, 186 deaths, 9 of them corrections officers, and about 50% of those were through or from a heart attack. In 2018, 188 deaths, 12 corrections officers, and then in 19, 20, and 21, we see those numbers increasing to about 400 deaths, an average of about 400 deaths per year, but they were due mostly to COVID. So we're not seeing the rates and numbers, and again, these are nationwide numbers. So from a fiscal impact to the state of New Hampshire, we at the Department of Corrections don't see this as anything that is significant and would be a challenge to the state to pay for any law enforcement, including corrections officers who die in the line of duty or by suicide. If there are no questions, I will take my seat, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Weiler?
Thank you. Ms. Cusack, did you bring this proposal to the Senate to have probation and parole officers included?
Yes, we did. So we started or initiated this process in 2020, I believe, with House Bill, or 2021 with House Bill 91, and we attempted to change some language there. In this year, we brought 1319 forward and included not only our probation and parole officers, but corrections line personnel. So we attempted to change the definition of who law enforcement were in that bill. Unfortunately, both of those bills were laid on the table and sent to potentially interim study. This is our last chance for this legislative session to get something done for our corrections officers.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Representative Emmerich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we need to have an amendment that includes probation officers, parole officers. Are there any other titles that need to be included?
And what we would also, our testimony says corrections line personnel. And those individuals are our nurses, our social workers, our chaplains, who work in the facility and are subject potentially to the same serious threats that our corrections officers are. There's federal law that, and the Bureau of Prisons allows their corrections line personnel to receive these benefits, including chaplains. I've read testimony and seen the legislation on that.
So the follow-up?
Yes,
So the
please.
term corrections line personnel would cover all the ancillary individuals.
They're a little bit different than the probation and parole officers.
Okay.
So it would be corrections officers, probation parole officers, and correction line personnel, which, yes, does include those ancillary chaplains, nurses, social workers.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Representative Heath?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is just with regard to juvenile parole officers. Where would they fit in this?
So the Department of Corrections does not, we do not have any juvenile probation and parole officers as our employees. They are with Department of Health and Human Services, and I am uncertain as to whether they have taken a active role in looking at this legislation.
Thank you.
Representative Waltz?
That was my first question that was answered about JPPOs, that I think if you're going to include probation and parole officers, we should be including JPPOs because there's really no difference. But I just want to let you know that about 10 years ago, this body created a study of gangs in this state, and I sat on that commission. And the finding is that we had a small problem with gangs in Manchester and Nashua, but the biggest problem with gangs was within our prisons. And it sounds like that's unchanged. Is that true?
I am not aware and don't have any statistics about the number of gangs that are in our population outside of our prisons. I am very familiar with the gangs inside of our prisons, and there are of about 1,200 people that are in our facility in Concord. We have 300 and some odd members of gangs, or again, security threat groups that have been certified by our staff as being active participants in a gang. The largest gangs that we have are the Bloods, and the Latin Kings, I believe, is another large gang, and then obviously the homegrown security threat group of BOW, the Brothers of White Warrior, is also a significantly sized security threat group in our facilities. So yes, they still exist. We do our best to fight that contraband. I have a staff of 14 internal affairs investigators that not only do internal affairs work about employee misconduct or that sort of thing, but also are actively pursuing and bring criminal prosecutions against those individuals that are actively bringing contraband and assaulting individuals in our facility. We're bringing those charges on a monthly basis. We get indictments.
Are there any further questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. J. Ward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I was going to testify on the same exact stuff that Ms. Cusack did, so you don't have to hear from me.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I do have a question. Is there anyone in the audience that knows why the Senate did not include the parole, probation, and correction line officers in the bill? Okay. Representative Turcotte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it would be possible, could the Senator Birdsall answer a couple technical questions on the language?
Representative Turcotte?
Thank you, Madam
I
Chair.
assume you have a question.
I do have, I understand.
Can I just make
Certainly.
a statement? I will find out what happened with the amendment in Senate. I think it's either ED&A or Senate Finance. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking the stand again.
Mhm.
I understand the general concept. My questions, I have a couple on the technical language, I guess, would be the issue. Is it the intent of this that any suicide of the named individuals that are under here would automatically be eligible for the payout? Is that the intent?
My understanding is there is first an investigation, because we covered this in our commission. Whenever there's a death, whether it's a suicide, and you can correct me if I'm wrong over there, but anytime there's a death, whether it's suicide or typical line of duty, there is an investigation. And if they find that this was a cause, was an in line of duty cause, then it would be eligible for payout.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Follow up?
Thank you. Okay. On line 5, it talks, I think it kind of introduces a new term. Let's go back actually to line 4. It talks of an incident, accident, violence, cause of death, and injuries. And then on line 5 and 6, it introduces a term called work-related. Yet it's not really defined. Is work-related supposed to be the same as an incident, or is it, what is that? It just appears to me to introduce something new that's not really delineated or defined.
Well, I think going back to my first answer is after the investigation, if it's looked at as work-related or caused by an incident that they had, then it would be work-related cause of death. That finding has to be that it has to have a finding of work-related, is my understanding.
Thank you. One more.
One more, thank you. So, on line 6, then it talks about the incident on who will make the determination. Would that be your intent, that the determination is made by one of the 3 or 4 groups or individuals that are listed there?
Well, again, I think it's the workers' comp insurance carrier that would be doing the investigation, as well as the police department or the fire department or the corrections department, along with the workers' comp insurance carrier would determine.
Okay, thank you.
Hope that helps.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you. Senator, just a quick question. Should I understand that I think that the issue that may raise the question, and this might be part of what Representative Turcott was asking about, is it talks on line 3 about killed in the line of duty means while in the performance of your duties. So, but I take it from what you're saying that is, for example, let's suppose that there's, I'm sort of making up an example that may not in fact comport with what actually happened. But suppose that there's been a series of tragic fires, let's say, where other firemen have been killed in the line of duty, that kind of thing, and a fireman commits suicide not at the scene or on the way to or home or back to the station from the scene, but a few days later. Am I understanding correctly from what you've said that if it were determined by, the insurance company or appropriate medical professionals that in fact the cause of the fireman's suicide several days later was as a result of the series of incidents that had happened where fellow officers had been killed, et cetera, that would be eligible for the benefit?
That is my intention, and as well as we've heard testimony in the commission, oftentimes where firefighters or police officers have gone to several fires, let's say, and they've had to deal with the death of young children or babies. It doesn't happen right away. Sometimes it takes months for this to develop into a suicidal attempt, and many times there may be some signs that the family sees, but their workers don't see. But many times it takes months to develop the suicidal tendencies, and so yes, it doesn't happen right away. It can take weeks, months, even sometimes years.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Forgive my naivete. I'm from a very small town, and we rely a lot on volunteers. And basically, if something happens, everybody shows up. And some of these volunteers, particularly our EMTs and the firefighters, this is what they do. They're very dedicated to this. And in reading this, when I first read it, I'm hearing that it's for professionals. But the way I'm reading it now, after Representative Turcott's comments, does this pertain to volunteers as well?
You better.
I will have to check on that, but I believe it does.
Oh, thank you.
But the chief also just had me look at this. This is based on a Supreme Court decision, the Dodier case. It says there are 4 types of injury causing risks commonly faced by an employee at work. 1, risks directly associated with employment. 2, risks personal to the claimant. 3, mixed risks, and 4, neutral risks. The first category, employment-related risks, includes the risk of injuries generally recognized as industrial injuries, such as fingers being caught in gears. This category of risk always arises out of employment. Now, the Dodier decision was made not too long ago, November 2020, and the opinion was issued that suicide can be seen as work-related. So.
Thank you very much. Representative Walls.
What court issued that decision?
I'm sorry?
What court issued that decision? To state, federal?
Supreme Court of New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? Seeing none, and thank you very.
Madam Chair?
Oh,
I'm sorry, Representative Murray's question is still I'm still pondering it, and I don't think we got a good answer. Does anybody know what the definition of professional is in terms of EMTs and firefighters? Would it just be for the fact that they get paid? Many volunteer fire members pay their colleagues when they respond. Same with EMTs. It's a de minimis amount, but nevertheless, they're paid. So would that automatically include them? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know, but I would think it would be a travesty if it did.
I'm not confident, but I will get back. I know this has been a topic of conversation in the commission. Our intent was to, I believe, include everyone, whether volunteer or professional.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
If we're making an amendment, I would propose including language that would be definitive and assure that they are certainly included. Thank you, Madam Chair.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Birdsall, for coming back and, and answering some of our questions. I really appreciate it.
And I'll try and get back to you on that other question.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further pink cards, so I'm closing the hearing on SB 277. Sorry, I closed the hearing on the wrong bill. 227. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. We did have Adam Schmidt, who did not testify, from the New Hampshire Association of Fire Chiefs, and he is in favor of the bill. So thank you very much. Yes? Okay, I'm sorry. It got under the other bill. All right. Is there anything you need to add? It's no big deal. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm sorry. I missed the pink card, so we will reopen the hearing on SB 227 so that Holly Stevens can provide some additional information to us. And please turn on your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Umberger, members of the committee. I'll make this very quick. I apologize for being a little bit late to the hearing. I had another meeting going on. I just wanted to go on record, Holly Stevens, the Public Policy Director of NAMI New Hampshire, that NAMI New Hampshire is in support of Senate Bill 227, as we were in support of House Bill 91, which is a bill that's nearly identical to this one that passed. It was a bill from last session that passed the House in the first session of this year, was considered by the Senate, and they ended up, I think, voting it interim study and moving the Senate Bill 227 forward. You know, we know that there are high numbers of suicides for first responders, higher than the general public. So we know that this work has an effect on those individuals that does stem directly from the work. And that being said, though, there's not an overabundance, luckily, of these suicides in New Hampshire. I believe there's been between 5 and 10 in the last 6 or 7 years. But to those families, even though there's not very many of them, to those families, this death benefit would be tremendous, and that's why we're in support of it. And I'll end it there. Again, just make it sweet, and we're in support of it, and urge the committee to support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Seeing none, now can I close the hearing? Thank you very much. Okay. I will now open the hearing on Senate Bill 409 relative to disaster relief loans. Senator Prentice, welcome.
Good morning, and Madam Chair, members of the House Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Suzanne Prentice. I'm the state senator for District 5, which covers 9 communities along the Connecticut River Valley. And I'm honored and pleased to be here this morning to introduce to you Senate Bill 409. This bill amends RSA 21P37-C, Section C, to further clarify how communities can obtain an emergency loan from the state for recovery for a catastrophic natural disaster. I'm going to summarize a story from this summer, and I trust that Representative Aaron is going to talk about this as well. But I categorize this bill as being a bill that's, for the little guys, helping out the smaller communities, and I think that's an important perspective to keep as we move forward. In the summer of 2021, parts of Cheshire and Sullivan County were impacted by 2 storms, causing damage to roadways, key pathways to work, school and sustainability of the local economy, to school and sustainability of the local economy. These communities include, but are not limited to, Charlestown, which is in District 5, and Ackworth, which is in District 8. This 3 to 4 inches of rain that fell over Ackworth on the night of July 29th and 30th washed out roads, damaged bridges, and destroyed culverts. Around 30 roads, which is 3/4 of the town's total. So I'm talking about Ackworth here. And again, Representative Aaron can correct me if I'm wrong, were damaged according to the engineer hired to oversee the repairs. Over a period of months, necessary repairs have waited, and some still do, due to the part in lack of local dollars to address the need while waiting for federal help to arrive. In Ackworth, a town of under 900 residents and with a budget shy of $3 million, repairs were estimated at more than $1 million. The estimate provided exceeded the town's immediate ability to address the situation and open roads. In a separate community in Charlestown, school children traveled over and continue to travel over what's close to a Class 6 road due to a delay in necessary repairs. It struck me that if we could move funding to these communities more expediently in the form of a non-interest-bearing loan, a no-interest loan, we would be able to address the safety and economic issues presented while the federal disaster relief process is underway. Although work has been done to address this through the exceptional disaster relief loans, I'm asking to just add this one more option. And adding this one more option creates the ability, and as the law is amended, for the governor to declare a natural disaster and then go to governor and council and request, and governor and council would ultimately approve an immediate non-interest-bearing loan for that community. And so FEMA disaster relief can often take years to be received. A temporary emergency loan is particularly helpful when a disaster would financially overwhelm a community and require a large appropriation that's raised from local taxes. And so 2 more things I just want to point out in this is that in the Senate, we amended this original bill, so you're seeing what's amended. And in that amendment, what we did was we clarified. I originally had joint fiscal in here, but we took joint fiscal out and went with the governor's request to governor and council to make this approval. The second was that a community cannot request more than what their estimates what the final request is going to be to FEMA, and that they are responsible, the municipality, to pay the loan back to the state. And if there is less received back to that community than what the loan was for, then they will work with governor and council and the governor's office to negotiate the terms of the payback to the state of New Hampshire. It's been my experience, and I know we have folks from Homeland Security and Emergency Management here that can touch on this, that the process that's done on estimates is done very well. So what I'm hoping is not to put in a community ever in a position where they've borrowed more than they really need. But if they do, there would be a mechanism again to negotiate those terms. And as I wrap up here, I just want to share with you, although I live in West Lebanon, New Hampshire now, hi, Representative Murray, nice to see you. I spent a number of years living in the North Country, and have, lived in smaller communities and have seen what can happen when a natural disaster overwhelms them. And I want to compare that to my experience living in the city of Lebanon and being a city councilor there when we had a microburst that wiped out an entire road, basically an entire part of the neighborhood had no connection to the main part of our city. And it was a multi-million-dollar, repairs that needed to be made. And it was a huge safety issue. We have, it doesn't make us better or smarter, but we had more money set aside in our rainy day fund, pardon the pun. We had a larger population, and we were able to take from our own coffers to make the immediate repairs so that people could actually drive up and down their roads and be safe and have water at their houses while we went through the FEMA process. And when FEMA paid us back, we paid ourselves back. Smaller communities are not always in this position. And I just think it's important that we recognize that and try to provide a mechanism for them to really help themselves and their residents be safe, support their businesses, their school children, and so on during these really tough times. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And if I don't have the answer, I'll certainly get back to you. And thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Senator Prentice. Are there any questions? Representative Heath.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Prentice. It's so nice to see you here. My question is with regard to governor and council. Within this bill, when I listened to what happened to Atworth, it was just so horrible, and they needed immediate help right away. And governor and council only meets every 2 weeks. Would this bill give authority to the governor and council to poll them remotely, to get permission to begin the process almost immediately, or do they have to go through the every 2 weeks?
Thank you for the question, Representative Heath, and it's good to see you today as well. It would not allow for any polling immediately. I'm sure that, as is with news like this, it does travel fast, and counselors are prepared, to address the issue. And I think the good news about governor and council is that they do meet twice a month, and which is, again, puts us on a faster track than where we currently are today. So I hope that addresses your question.
Representative Leachman.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for appearing. How are you?
Good. How are you?
So I'd like to take it a little further as far as your no interest loans and trying to protect the smaller communities. Was there consideration of just grants within your legislation so these small communities like Ackworth would not be responsible for paying back these so-called loans, even though they're interest-free, as you've said, but wouldn't it be more that they were just strictly grants?
Madam Chair and Representative, is it
Leishman, yeah.
Thank you for the question. So keep in mind that they're going to borrow this money from the state, and then they're going to get reimbursed by FEMA. So they're going to get that money back, and then they need to pay the state back. So that is the structure of it. The only time we could get into muddy water is if for some reason, they got less from FEMA than what they have borrowed. And it provides, again, language in here so there could be a negotiation. Okay, so they're not, it's not a loan that they don't, they're going to get money from, they will get money from FEMA to pay back the loan.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
Representative Mooney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator, for being here.
Thank you.
I last night pulled House Bill 1665, which came to this committee recently, establishing a municipal road and bridge disaster relief fund. I see the prime sponsor in the audience. I'm just curious if perhaps you or maybe she could answer if there could be a marriage between your bill and this bill.
Thank you for the question, Representative Mooney. Is this Representative Aaron's bill? I'm
It
always happy to work with Representative Aaron. We both have, if you're comfortable, a common goal in solving this problem. So if that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. And I'm happy to work with Representative Aaron. Okay? Thank you.
Representative Lynn.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I just want to, with regard to subsection D, about negotiating. In other words, if the amount of the FEMA money is less than the amount of the no interest loan, it says shall negotiate repayment terms of the difference. Should I understand that language to mean that there is an obligation to repay? There's no question that the municipality has to repay the loan. The only question for negotiation is, for example, over what period of time, what interest rate might apply, or is it that maybe they don't have to repay the loan or they don't have to repay all of it, and that's supposed to be the subject of negotiation?
Representative Lynn, thank you for the question. So the way that I read this and in my thinking is that negotiation includes the potential for a forgiveness depending on the size. Again, I'd like to think that our size of the amount, I'd like to think that our estimates based on my experience that come from FEMA and what is actually, is going to be borrowed here should be down to the penny. But if I would leave that to governor and council to make that decision on what negotiation is, because they're ultimately going to do it.
Okay. Follow up?
Follow up?
So I guess please understand, I'm completely supportive of this bill, but I guess what I'm wondering is, when you say they will negotiate, okay, they'll negotiate. Suppose they don't come to a decision and it goes to court because they can't agree. What does the court do? What's the law? They have to negotiate. What does that mean? They've negotiated. They haven't been able to come to an agreement. What's the law in terms of whether the court, what does the court say? Well, you do have to pay it all back, or you don't, or that's the thing that I see as sort of a problem.
I understand, and you're Representative Lynn. You're certainly, have outpaced me in experience on the judicial side, as I'm aware. But I'd have to think about that. I mean, if this went to a court, if the law says it's a negotiation, and again, I don't have the judicial experience you are between governor and council in that community, they could ultimately turn around and push the decision back to governor and council in the community to make that decision, or they could rule. I can't say what a court may or may not do, but I think that I understand your concern. I want to be clear.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Weiler.
I'm also shocked by this pay it all back, because the way it generally works is, it comes years later, but FEMA will pay like 75%. And then the town or the state will split up the other 25%, sometimes to the advantage of the town, sometimes not. Sometimes they expect to split that 25%. So I've seen cases where the state takes a bigger share than the town. That could still apply, but might be the negotiation in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Weiler. I know it's not a question, but I do want to, again, just point out that we do have Homeland Security and Emergency Management in the room, and they'll speak to, there's a process for this that's already in place in terms of the applications and how the paying back and the percentage goes. So we'd be sure if you have questions, we can address that with Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Thank you.
Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Have you checked into similar things like TAN notes, tax anticipation notes? Because it seems so we could apply the same process. In other words, we do it at the county all the time. We borrow money to survive because we don't get funded into the budget process. So have you checked into that at all? Because it would seem to solve the problem, because you're anticipating money from FEMA, possibly the state, and then the rest of the share of the municipality.
Thank you, Representative Petrie. No, frankly, I have not looked into tax anticipation notes, but I would be happy to do that.
I
Wish
mean,
I wish I brought my laptop with me.
if I may follow up, if it's not, a tax anticipation, but it could follow the same logic.
Okay.
Are there any further questions? Representative Turcott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. This may be a better question for the FEMA people later, but on line 7, when it talks about the anticipated assistant, my concern is we have a floor outlined in lines 9 through 11 on the amount, 25% of the amount raised by local property taxes, blah, blah, blah. My concern is the top end of that, what that loan might be. And that kind of brings us back to, I think, line 7, where it talks about anticipated assistance. And my question is, how is that anticipated assistance determined?
So I thank you for the question, Representative Turcott. I'm going to defer a majority of this to our state agency, but I think that the FEMA estimation process that they go through to make a determination about the damage that's been done will align with the anticipation, but let's hold and clarify there, and thank you.
Great, thank you.
I do have one. Oh, sorry, Representative Irf.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator. Is there significance to the change of the word occurrence to incident on lines 9 and 10?
That was an amendment that was made in the Finance Committee of the Senate, and they just wanted to make sure that it was more all-encompassing in case there were multiple occurrences. They preferred that language.
So an occurrence is not an incident or vice versa?
So there could be an incident and there could be multiple occurrences within an incident from different parts of a community. So that same community, different problems. So that, and that's the policy statement. I don't disagree with it. I was happy to make the amendment.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Next person will call on Representative Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee, for hearing me today. For the record, my name is Representative Judy Aaron. I represent Sullivan County District 7, which is Ackworth, Goshen, Langdon, Leominster, and Washington. And I come to you today in support of this Senate bill. I believe that it certainly makes some positive marginal change to current statute. Living in Ackworth and having to deal with the massive damage that happened to our town this past July 29th, I have to tell you that current statute really was useless for us. We were in desperate need of immediate help, and the statute currently didn't do anything for us because it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 months after the event happened that there was a presidential declaration of emergency. And of course, when a horrific event like this happens to your town, you can't wait 3 or 4 months to reopen roads and get people to their homes and be able to get emergency vehicles through. You can't even do a proper RFP to have, things go out to bid. You have to grab whoever is available to get roads fixed and passable and safe, to be able to get to utility poles that are damaged, to be able to have farmers be able to get to their fields. We were in a situation where all hands were on deck You couldn't wait for the state. You couldn't wait for the federal government. And that was the position that we were in. And I have to say, even with the prospect of being able to get a loan from the state, that was not an option for us at the time because there was no guarantee. We were told that, oh, you can apply for a loan from the state. And this was after the emergency declaration became available. But that process would take maybe 3 to 6 months, and we don't know whether you apply for it, you're going to get granted the money. So with no assurances at all, the only thing that Ackworth had as an option at the time, once we were scrambling around trying to get everything reopened, was to go to a local bank, Muskoma Bank, and we got a $2.1 million loan. Yeah, we could have come to the state, but we had no assurance at all whether what we asked for would come to any kind of reality. And the reality is, when you need the money, you need the money. So I know that Senator Daniels had asked me recently, well, why didn't you get a loan from the state? Well, this was why, because we were told you'd have to work on all this paperwork to get whatever bureaucracy to request a loan from the state, and there's no assurance at the end of that whether you would get it. There's no assurance that we'll get anything from the projects that we've submitted to FEMA. I mean, we've got several projects in the pipeline now, and we have no assurance that any of those are going to be compensated from FEMA. None. But the reality is you got to get the work done. So we get the work done, we submit it, and cross our fingers and hope for the best. And I got to say, too, I've gotten letters from several other select board members in my district, one from Lemster. Lemster is in a precarious situation where we've spent $1.25 million of our own money to partially repair roads and bridges from the flood last summer. We have not had to borrow money, nor did we ask for any at town meeting, but we're certainly close to running out of funds because of this. We've paid every bill that's come across our desk in regard to this problem and don't see any monies coming from FEMA in the near future. In fact, in Ackworth, we're not expecting any kind of FEMA payments until maybe summer at this point. Currently, these towns are waiting and waiting for funds to come through. I had another letter from Lucian Beam, who is a select board member of Langdon. And he wrote to me to tell me that because of Route 12 being closed down in Charlestown, because, Route 12 is falling into the Connecticut River slowly, it's having an impact on 2 roads in Langdon. South Hemlock Road and Meany Road were subject to heavy vehicle counts. They went from a traffic count of 50 cars a day to well over 1,000. And that includes trucks, and that includes school buses. So clearly, with that kind of traffic, with this responsibility for Langdon comes the cost of maintaining those 2 roads, which to date has cost the town $28,000 in the form of gravel, stone, sand, salt, and labor. And there's no guarantee FEMA's going to cover any of that. So these towns in this area, it's not just Ackworth. Ackworth, yeah, we got hit pretty badly, but the surrounding towns have gotten badly hurt as well. And the fact of the matter is, these towns are suffering financially. We don't have the tax base to be able to, have a big pot of money saved to deal with these kinds of disasters. And we had hoped that the state would come through and, toss us a bone, do something to help us. But all I can say is this particular statute and the changes is an improvement, but I don't know that it goes far enough to really help us in the immediate time when an event like this happens. And of course, as we are going forward, we have ongoing expenses, and we're just sitting and waiting for FEMA reimbursement if that ever comes. So that's kind of all I wanted to report to you, and I hope that as a committee you can do something to maybe improve this, to be able to give more immediate funding to these towns, either right after the event happens or as they are sitting and waiting for any kind of reimbursement from the federal government. It would be nice if the state could just grant some money. And yes, I know, to Representative Leishman's question, I know that there's an expectation, well, you're going to be getting money from the federal government. Well, it would be nice not to have to rely on them to begin with. And that's all I have to say. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Aaron. Representative Weiler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Aaron. Keep careful track of all the money the town spends. That will be like your soft match. If they ever demand any kind of match, all that can be considered. So as long as somebody's keeping track of all that extra work, it's going to be credited. You may not be repaid for it in full, but at least that's a beginning. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Representative Leishman.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks for your testimony and appearing. So I do have a concern, as you indicated and picked up on, as far as these small towns coming up with any sort of repayment because you have such a limited tax base. But I'm curious, the $2.1 million loan, what were the terms for repayment? Do you recall?
The bank, Mascoma Bank, bless their hearts, are working with us. They have been very, very generous in their terms. They are willing to work with us. They realize the enormous impact this has had on a town our size. We're 850 people. We have an annual operating budget of $1.3 million. The damage that was done in our town has been estimated upwards of 26 million. And 26 million, certainly that would be if every road was put back perfectly the way it's supposed to, with the right size culverts, with the right size everything. It's, the perfect, the way it should be. We're probably not going to get to that because as whatever we can budget is whatever we can pay is what we're going to be able to pay. And so we may not be able to use the biggest, rightest kind of culvert for any particular road. But we'll do what we can do within our financial means. And right now we're sitting here thinking, okay, well, we're sort of with this $2.1 million loan, we've structured it to be sort of like a home equity loan that you can tap into, grab some money to do a project. When you get reimbursed from the project, you take some of that funding and you put it back, pay back that part of the loan. So we're only having to pay interest on the amount of that money that we've been pulling out, not the whole 2.1 million. So the bank has been very generous in their terms in working with us to do that. And so we spent, I think last year, we spent about 1.3 million on road repair, and we are estimating for this year 1.6 million. And some of that is going to be loan money, some of that is tax money, and we'd be blessed if the state threw us some extra money to help us in the form of a grant, but I don't see that that's going to happen, unfortunately.
You never know.
Please, I would love it if you can do that.
Are there any further questions? Representative Ayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. It certainly underscores the need for this legislation. My question is, I had one that Representative Leishman had asked, but the second one that I was thinking about was, have you reached out to our congressional delegation And were they able to, apparently not able to help pressure FEMA?
No, we contacted just about everybody that we could, and there was nothing that they could seem to do for us.
Are there further questions? Thank you very much, Representative Aaron, and
Appreciate it.
I will now call on Catherine Heck.
Good morning, Representative Umberger and members of the committee.
Good morning.
My name is Catherine Heck, and I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are here to support Senate Bill 409. And I won't reiterate all the reasons what were stated in previous testimony, except to say that always additional financial tools in the event of an emergency or disaster can be beneficial to our communities. To Representative Mooney's point, we have Senate Bill 402 that's going to be coming over to the House that creates an avenue for the governor to approve with the Executive Council and disperse financial assistance to municipalities, as well as RSA 13:4 already allows the governor to grant such emergency grants in the event of an emergency through specific channels. So that combined with FEMA and legislation like this, that could hopefully fill some of the gaps that exist in the event of a catastrophic municipal emergency. So I will keep my testimony short and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I will now thank you very much for your
Thank you.
testimony. I will call on Jennifer Harper.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Jennifer Harper. I'm the Director for Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And with me is Fallon Reed, who is our Special Projects Coordinator and who has been dealing with our disaster recovery process for about the last 6 years. So she's really the expert. So the bill as amended, we do concur with it. We were involved in the edits of it, the amendments of it. There is an exceptional disaster relief loan rule that will be amended based on the outcome of what happens with this bill. But I just want Fallon to go through a couple of the points that may answer some questions that have come up in this.
Sure. Excuse me just a minute.
Yep.
You said there's another bill out there?
This bill came from the current 21P37C. So there's we already have administrative rules to reflect the current bill that Senator Gaida put through in 2018. So there's rules that will answer some of the questions you all brought up that would just be amended based on the outcome of this.
Okay. And we do need a card from you as well.
Sure.
Okay. So sorry to interrupt. Please go ahead.
No, that's okay. So a couple notes I just based on previous questions that you had asked. So in regards to the House Bill 1665, the one that Representative Aaron had sponsored for the roads and bridges. So one thing that had come up with that and goes to the conversation between a loan and a grant is if the state were to grant a community money for these repairs, it would conflict with FEMA eligibility. And so FEMA would not be able to reimburse the communities because they would consider it duplication of benefits. So through 21P37 and other things, the state has come up with this loan, which is just a temporary to get them through, which FEMA does not see as a duplication of benefits. It's just a temporary loan of money. So that's kind of the difference between some of those things. As I mentioned, we do have rules already. So there is a piece in the rule about the loan repayment, that if the amount that the FEMA assistance is, the state treasurer, with the advice and consent of governor and council, shall negotiate the terms of repayment If the local and state treasurer are unable to reach an agreement, the Department of Revenue Administration shall include the amount in the amount apportioned of setting property tax rates. So I'm hoping that answers your question, Representative Lynn, about what to do if we can't come to an agreement. As far as how the anticipated assistance is determined, there's a couple steps in that. So when we have a disaster that occurs in the state, and our office, the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, which is a division within safety, will reach out to our local and state partners to assess what their initial damage assessments are. And if we think we're going to meet the threshold, which is just over $2 million, then we'll have FEMA come in and validate those costs with us to do a preliminary damage assessment, which is what we did after the storms this summer. And so the damage assessments for both those storms together was just about $6 million, but that's not all inclusive. They get to a point where they're comfortable saying, yes, you have exceeded it. And then that triggers the request from us to the president for the disaster declaration. And what's been going on now and since October when we received the disaster declaration is the more detailed line item assessment of the actual costs, which as of last week is not completely validated, but between the two disasters, we're right around the $18 million mark. So you can see where we started at, the 6 million was what FEMA initially said, and we're up to 18, and we're working on validating all of those. As far as the current loan goes, for exceptional disaster relief, it's a one-page loan application and just a few pieces of information that are needed from the community. We work off of the damage assessment numbers to do the loan. We have yet to issue a loan under this program yet. We haven't had a request for that, but we would fast track that as it's needed, that the information or the money is needed. It's currently with the interest rate that's listed in the current rules, says no greater than the prevailing rate. And then with this modification to 0 interest, we think that would be beneficial to everyone. One other piece that I did want to mention, Representative Weiler, with the public assistance program, there is no soft match. So it's for our non-disaster grants that have a soft match. The disaster grants, the community or the applicant is responsible for the 25% unless we come up with something else. Currently for these two disasters, based on some items that the president has passed, it's a 90-10 split right now. So the applicant's only responsible for 10% for these two disasters. And that's I'm hoping I answered all the questions you had previously, and we're certainly willing to answer anything else that may come up.
Representative Weiler.
No, by soft match, you say the community might be responsible for 10%. Wouldn't that include all the work they've done?
So the work that they have done is what is reimbursed at 75% or 90% in this case. They are not responsible to pay us the 10% or anything like that. They would just either absorb that, or if the state were to make a modification, which is what the Senate Bill 402 is looking to do, is have that opportunity based on the amendment that was passed through last week for the governor to be able to say, we'd like to help the community. And it's kind of open-ended so that it's not the bill had originally started with 12.5, but basically it was amended so that a community could ask the governor to go to the legislature and say, we'd like to help them for whatever amount is deemed. But so soft match generally when it comes to the grants is we look at volunteer time or staff time and offset that. It doesn't apply for disaster grants because you're looking more at the labor, materials, all that kind of stuff. So it's a cash kind of responsibility. So FEMA will cover 75 or 90%, and then it's on the individual applicant to make sure that they cover the 10 or whatever percent it happens to be for that disaster.
Thank you.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to make sure that if I'm understanding what you said, that there's a rule that has been adopted by DRA, is it?
So it's a DOS, the Department of Safety rule.
Oh, okay.
And the language in the rule, it's under the section for loan terms, paragraph B as in Baker.
Okay.
And it says if the local government and the state treasurer are unable to reach an agreement on the repayment, then DRA will include the amount in the amount apportioned in setting the property tax rates.
All right. So if I'm understanding, then the bottom line of that rule, so to speak, is if the town and the state are not able to reach an agreement, DRA will say the town loses.
Yes, based on the way this paragraph is.
Okay. And then and may I just ask one follow-up?
You may.
And so now it's gonna, that money that has to be repaid is going to be included in the town's, what the town has to collect in taxes, and then will then be repaid to the
Yes.
state. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any further questions? Representative Turcott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. Excellent job going over everything that was discussed. One final question on line 7 with the anticipated assistance. You gave a great description of how that occurs. My question is, what is the anticipated timeline from disaster to the time you determine what that anticipated assistance from FEMA is going to be?
Sure. So I wish I had an easy answer for you. And part of the situation we're in is a state government administering a federal program. So we have to adapt to the federal rules for the program. So depending on the nature of the disaster can really determine how quickly something can be processed. So in, I believe it was 2018, for example, March 2018, we had 2 disasters back to back on the seacoast. One was a snow disaster where we had exceptional amounts of snow and emergency work was covered. We were able to get that disaster declaration, pay out the communities, and close out in a 2-year span. However, we have other large natural scale disasters like flooding and things that take years. We just are closing out Hurricane Irene for 9 years of work with that because of the severity of it. So what we're looking to do right now, there's 2 categories of work essentially with the FEMA program. We have emergency work, which are things that are done immediately following the disaster to get to a livable status, not perfect. And then we have our permanent work is where we look at mitigation. So the priority right now is getting through our emergency work category so we can get some money to the communities. And I know that our staff, that's the priority, is the emergency work things. So as Representative Aaron said, they likely won't see any money till this summer, which is a true statement. And then the permanent work will come after that as we meet milestones with the projects. So it is a lengthy process with FEMA, which is why we were hopeful with this loan with Senator Guida's work in the previous years, that this would be an interim solution so that smaller communities, you know, could basically still put food on the table and pay their staff, but deal with the disasters. So I don't have a hard and fast timeline for you, but it is a lengthy process, as is most federal programs, unfortunately.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So is it fair to say that at a minimum for the emergency portion of the project, you're looking at 9 months to a year at the
Yeah.
minimum? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Representative Leishman?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I guess I just couldn't sit here any longer after listening to the representative from Ackworth and her testimony. And when you said there's a rule that says the DRA will assign whatever is not paid back, in a follow-up to Representative Lynn's question, how fair is that, that a community's been walloped with a $26 million in damage? They have an operating budget of 1.3 million, and then say they take out this loan, or another community, and they can't come to an agreement with the government, the state government, and then the DRA assesses that on the taxpayers?
If
Of
I
the
may-
10%?
Sure, if I may clarify. So they would only, we would work with the community to do a loan amount that is reasonable to their damages. So, you know, if they had $3 million in damages or roughly around there, we wouldn't encourage them to do a loan for 10 million. So the repayment really comes back to if for some reason the FEMA eligibility is less than what they took the loan for. But we would work with the community to make sure that the loan amount they're requesting is in line with what we believe is eligible or likely to be eligible. So the likelihood that it would need to go to the point where DRA would assign tasks, I feel would be rare. And with the addition of the language in this current amendment where it says the municipality shall not knowingly request a loan for more than what their FEMA eligibility is, that'll help kind of put some guardrails. So let's say, for example, that Ackworth were to ask the state for the $2.1 million loan versus the bank. That is, based on the amount of damages they have, completely reasonable. And I would expect that FEMA will reimburse that $2 million, if not much more. So we only would get into the issue where DRA would need to tax the town or the residents as if for some reason the FEMA amount was much less than what we had originally given them the loan for. Because basically right now we have what we think is eligible, and I can make a educated decision on that. But sometimes there are things that come in that are not eligible for whatever reason. We're not done in line with codes and standards or proper procurement or any of those kind of administrative pieces. But I don't think we would knowingly or willingly encourage the community to do a loan that would be far in excess of what FEMA would look at eligible.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Are there any further questions? Representative Lynn?
Yes, just in sort of follow up to that, I wonder. I mean, suppose that we were disposed to change the language of that last section just a little bit. And what I'm thinking is, suppose instead of saying shall negotiate repayment of the terms, we said shall attempt to negotiate repayment of the terms, and then added the following: and if the state and the municipality are unable to reach agreement, either party may seek resolution of the matter by the Superior Court, which shall decide upon a resolution that is fair and just under all the circumstances. Would that solve I mean, that would allow the court then to decide, who should win, or whether it's appropriate to split the matter somehow.
Yeah, and based on just listening to that, I don't see any conflict with any of our federal guidance or anything like that. So I think it would be worth pursuing to see if that language would meet what you're looking to do.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Representative Walz.
Thank you. I'm just having a hard time understanding the difference between the 18 million that you've approved and the 26 million that Ackworth said that they have out there. Is it that they thought that they needed to do things and you didn't think that it fit within federal guidelines?
Sure. So, and certainly Representative Aaron can clarify, but what she had mentioned was their engineer had looked at essentially soup to nuts, fixing it and making it better to prevent, which includes mitigation. And right now our $18 million is only the immediate repairs to get it back to the day before. The next step is to look at mitigation to improve it so it doesn't happen again. And we just haven't gotten there. That's not the priority right now. It's looking at what is the immediate fix. And then our goal is through that process to have mitigation so that things don't happen again. If I make a quick example, so in the Alstead floods back in 2005, a similar type of disaster wiped the community off the map. But through the public assistance program, we were able to do mitigation. And these storms that came through, those roads and bridges that had mitigation weren't touched. And it was the perfect example of the mitigation program to show that we invested that money and time to make things better, to improve. And then they made it out very well in these last storms.
Follow up?
Yeah. So in time, Ackworth may see some of that money either through this program or another program, but it's going to be mitigation money, not repair money. It's just a question of what silo it's in and when it comes.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any other questions? I do have one, and maybe when we go to our work session is when we can answer it. But everybody's talking about small towns, but there's nothing in this legislation that is anything about a small town. It would appear to me that any town, no matter whether you're small or large, could apply for this. So which is it? Are we trying to address the small towns, or are we trying to address the entire state? I mean, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm sure you don't either. I mean, that's something that maybe Division 2 can think about a little bit. But you know, they're two, you know, two different things here.
Representative Umberger, one item that is in here is the 25% of the town's operating budget, which I think for a larger community or city would be an exceptional amount of money, which would deem them ineligible for this. So that may clarify the piece for it, that this is intended for small communities without coming out and saying that. But it is that in paragraph B, the incident cost of the projects has to equal or exceed 25% of the amount raised by taxes in the current budget. So I would presume that that would exclude many of the larger communities unless they were completely, you know, devastated. But I'm not sure if that helps or
Okay,
not.
so, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, the hearing is closed, and I believe both Division 1 and Division 2 have work sessions. So if our Division 2 friends could join us over there, we'll take about 5 minutes to stretch and oh, okay. All right. I just recessed till after the hearing, so. Okay.
Get the difference between doing the repair work and doing the remediation work. When you're doing the repair work, you want to do the remediation. And FEMA doesn't want you to commingle that. And it's just been such a They stepped in, the state gave them money, they repaired them, thank you very much. The state, now.
You sign it for me.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll call the public hearing to order. We will be discussing SB 371, making an appropriation to the lead paint hazard remediation fund. And I see that Senator Rosenwald is here. Whoops, that's the wrong one. Okay. To introduce the bill.
I am.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. For the record, I'm Cindy Rosenwald. I represent Senate District 13, which is most of Nashua. And I'm pleased to introduce Senate Bill 371. This bill will appropriate $3 million of general funds in fiscal year 2023 to replenish the lead paint hazards remediation fund that is managed by the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. This fund was established 3 years ago to offer zero interest loans to help property owners make housing safe for children by remediating lead paint. Child care centers are also able to access this loan money to remove lead hazards from drinking water. And as this committee knows, and I know it's not the policy committee, but children exposed to lead dust from old paint can suffer permanent brain damage. There is no safe level of lead, and New Hampshire has some of the oldest housing stock around, and it's really all over the state. We have close to 500 children in the state who have been identified as having elevated blood lead levels. And that we've seen that in the 3 years since we've established this loan fund, about 300 units of housing has been rehabbed, and the fund is now just about depleted. But we still have hundreds of children who are at risk of irreparable brain damage. And I should note that the zero interest loans from this fund are repaid when the property is transferred. So could be quickly, could be a long time, but the money does come back. I did have, when I was filing this bill, I had a conversation with HUD to see if the lead in drinking water funds that are in the Infrastructure Investment Act could be used instead of general funds. Unfortunately, that provision, those funds are to replace water service lines. So the pipes out on the street, not in individual private housing. And this bill came out of Senate Finance unanimously. It passed the Senate on a voice vote. I hope this committee will agree that we have more work to do to keep children from being poisoned by lead and then drinking water. And I'm happy to try and answer questions. There are subject matter experts here, though. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you.
And I still have a hard time with the Senator Rosenwald.
Oh, whatever.
Knew you too many years otherwise, but I'm glad you're sitting over in the Senate. So, Mr. Frost, Ben Frost from New Hampshire Housing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee members. My name is Ben Frost. I'm the Deputy Director of New Hampshire Housing, and I'm here happily in support of Senate Bill 371 and with gratitude to Senator Rosenwald for being the prime sponsor on this and being here today to introduce the bill. we welcome the appropriation, the additional appropriation to the lead fund, which New Hampshire Housing administers. The lead fund was created as part of the trailer bill in the 2019 biennial budget and was made part of New Hampshire Housing's statute, which is RSA 204C. So it's a statutory fund. It is a non-lapsing fund. So once the appropriation, any appropriation is made by the legislature to the fund, it becomes essentially no longer state funds, but funds that are administered by New Hampshire Housing on behalf of the state. And we spend it as projects are presented to us. As Senator Rosenwald said, something on the order of 300 units using the initial 2019 appropriation of $3 million have been remediated of the lead hazard. And that is mostly rental units, although we can also use it for low-income, single-family, owner-occupied residences. But most of it is for rental properties. And these tend to be smaller rental properties, so mom and pop owners, if you will. And that is the vast bulk of where this funding goes. So these are landlords who don't really have a lot of capital available to them to do this very expensive work. And so where they're owning these properties and renting to low-income tenants, the owners don't have the financial wherewithal to perform the remediation of lead paint hazards on the property. This program is a critical resource to helping to ensure the safety of children living in those apartments and also in the single-family homes. This money was, the original fund, as I said, was created in 2019 with a $3 million appropriation by the legislature as part of the trailer bill. To date, we have allocated almost all of those $3 million. In fact, as of today, we have unobligated $420. That's it. So it's all gone to the projects that are in need of lead paint and remediation. When I spoke in support of this legislation in the Senate Finance Committee in the hearing, I was asked a question about the repayment of the loans, because these are only done as loans, and that's by statutory requirement. We can't do grants. We would do loans anyway, but I was asked, well, how long before this becomes a self-sustaining fund? I will say it will be a long time before this is a self-sustaining fund. In the past couple of years, we've been running this program. 3 loans have been repaid for a total of $54,000 and change. So that's really not much to keep a program running. As Senator Rosenwald said, the loans are repaid at the time a property is sold. Given that landlords tend to hang on to their properties because they are income properties for them, these properties don't sell on any regular basis. They will eventually, and so those loans will come back to the fund at some point. But right now, there is extraordinary demand and extraordinary need for the additional work to be done in those properties all over the state where we have lead paint hazards. And it is all over the state. As Senator Rosenwald said, we have one of the oldest housing stocks in the country. That's just the nature of where we are and who we are as a state. And that means that we have a particularly high incidence of lead paint existing in these rental properties. Lead paint was banned by federal law in 1978, and we have an awful lot of pre-1978 structures currently occupied all over the state. I will say that just to give a hard number to it, we have completed 286 housing units in the state using the state funds that were appropriated a couple of years ago, and there's another 7 that are still underway. So this is a little under 300 units that will have been remediated of lead hazards with the original $3 million that was made. So I'm happy to take any questions. before I do that, I do want to note, we also run the federal lead paint remediation program. That's funded by HUD, and we use the two sources of funding together. In fact, we leverage the state funds roughly 1-to-1 with federal funding. The state funding, based on the standards that the legislature, established in 2019, are a bit more flexible than the federal funding. So there are some properties where that are not eligible for federal funding that we can use, where we can use the state funding. But generally speaking, most of the work that we do uses both federal and state funding in them. I think I'll stop there and be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Representative Hatch?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, I'm sorry. If somebody's to qualify for a loan, does the mitigation effort have to be total removal, or do you allow encapsulation?
Thank you for that question. It's a really great question. Removal of lead would be extraordinarily expensive. That is, to strip all of the lead paint out of a building would be prohibitively expensive. And so most of the work that is done is encapsulation, keeping, safe, covering over the layers, or painting so that you have high quality durable paint. The issue really with lead paint, for the most part, has to do with friction and impact surfaces. So windows moving up and down, doors opening and closing. We have this notion based on I remember them, the ads from the 1970s, late 70s, of young children eating the paint, taking chips of paint. That does happen. But actually, more often, it's the dust that you can't see, you can't feel. But a child simply putting his or her hand on a windowsill that has that dust from the window opening and closing, and then putting their fingers to the mouths, a parent isn't going to see that, but it does happen, and that's really where the great hazard is. So encapsulation is the preferred alternative. Ideally, in a perfect world with unlimited resources, eliminating the lead entirely from the living environment would be great, but it's just too expensive to do.
Thank you. Representative Petrie?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. What's the typical length of the loans that you provide for this service?
Great question. The loans last as long as the owner owns the property. There is no term, no specific term. So as long as the owner owns the property, the lien on the property resides with that property. If the owner sells the property, then the loan would be repaid.
Thank you.
Representative DeBerge?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for you. I mean, what criteria used by HUD not to allocate funds for the units? I mean, there's this disparity between what the state allows for, for mitigation and what HUD allows. What's the difference in the units?
It's a very good question, and it's a simple difference. It's one of income levels. So the federal grant requires that the property be, a rental property be occupied by someone making 80% or less of area median income. The state law allows us to go up to 90% of area median income. So that little bit of flexibility increases the numbers of properties that are eligible.
Did you have a follow-up? Oh, okay. Representative Wallner?
Thank you. My question is, how many child care providers have accessed the loans?
Again, great question. As created by the legislature, this fund can be used in income qualified rental properties, income qualified owner occupied homes, or in licensed daycare centers to remediate the lead paint hazards there. We have worked with the Department of Health and Human Services to make the availability of this funding source known to licensed daycare facilities, but to date, none of them have expressed an interest in doing that. I suspect that is because in order to get a license, the facility has to be in good repair, which means you wouldn't need to do the encapsulation of the lead paint. That's a guess on my part, but I think it's probably a rational conclusion.
Representative Hatch, did you have a follow-up? You're all set? Are there any, Representative Lynn?
Yes, I wonder if you could tell me, with regard to the properties that are not owner occupied, that is rented, you mentioned that there's an income limit on the tenants. Is there any income limit on the owner of the property?
There is not.
So a sort of a large corporation that has lots and lots of rental units could qualify for this.
That is possible. They could qualify, but I'll repeat what I said earlier. Most of the units that have been remediated using the state funds have been small owners. We have done, I think, a couple of units with the owner Elm Grove, which is a large rental property owner in the Manchester area, but they're expanding. But very few, actually, a very small number of their portfolio.
Thank you.
Are there any further, Representative Turcott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sir, for being here. Just 4 really quick individual questions, all related. Is interest paid on the loans?
No interest.
No interest. And I'm assuming it's a balloon payment at the end when it's sold?
Yes.
Can the loans ever be forgiven?
Yes, they could be. And that would be at our discretion, New Hampshire Housing. So, say for example, a property owner, because of shifts in the market, was underwater with a mortgage. They didn't have any equity in the property, and they were selling the property. In that kind of situation, we would forgive the loan.
And the final one, you mentioned a transfer ownership. Let's say I owned a 4-unit and it was in my wife and I's name, and we decided to put it into a trust. Would that qualify as a transfer?
That would be a transfer.
Thank
yes.
you.
Representative Erf?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are the federal funds loans or grants?
It's a combination, but typically done as loans.
And what are the terms of those loans?
The same terms. They stay with the property until the property is transferred, and no interest. That's why the funds work really well together.
Are there any, sorry, Representative Turcott, you had your chance.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
On the forgiven question that you said, yes, has your department ever forgiven any loans?
We've only been running the state-funded program for a couple of years, and I don't think we've had need to forgive, that we've not been requested to forgive any loans. I'd have to go back and check to see if we've forgiven any of the federal loans.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Waltz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to follow up on what Representative Lynn hit upon, and that is the idea that big corporations could take advantage of this. If we were to put a limitation in here, limiting it so that big corporations, big residential groups could not take advantage of it, would that be a problem? Would that create difficult issues for you?
I suppose it would depend on how the limitation were worded. I guess I would need to see the language in order to be able to say whether it would be difficult or easy. I will just say in response to both your question and Representative Lynn's question, most of this, it goes to the small scale landowners, property owners.
Madam Chair? Thank you.
Representative Hatch?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Along with that train of thought, I don't know that it's relevant how large the corporation is or how large or wealthy the entity is that owns a property. The purpose of this program is to mitigate lead poisoning in youth. And as you stated many times, a preponderance of the loans go towards relatively low rent properties or Section 8 properties or that type of thing. So I don't know why that's even matters. It doesn't really add value to the property that much. Thank you.
I'll take that as a question and say yes.
Are there any further questions? I do have one question, Mr. Frost, and that is, do you have a waiting list at this point of people that are waiting for this appropriation?
We do, but I regret I don't know how long that waiting list is. What I'll say right now is the program capacity is limited not by demand, but by the availability of contractors. So we could run a bigger program with more funds, subject to what you choose to appropriate. But the real limiting factor is the availability of contractors to do the work. And by contractors, I mean contractors who are trained and certified to do lead paint remediation, which is a very specialized, narrow field.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, we appreciate it. And I know that Division, are you having a work session? Yeah. Is having a work session at 2:00, and it would be nice if you could
I
join
will be
it.
there.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. This online stuff is really working. I have 56 that support the SB 371, and I have 2 opposed. And the testimony that was sent in will be available in the bill folder for anyone to look at. So I want to thank the folks that are out there, and hopefully all 58 of these have watched what we had to say today. So thank you, and I will close the hearing. Oops, sorry. I won't close the hearing. Ryan Hale from New Hampshire Bankers is in favor. Don McKinney, New Hampshire Legal Assistance, is in favor. Adam Schmidt, New Hampshire Association of Realtors, and Jennifer Smith, MD, is also in favor of this bill. So thank you for attending today. All right, now I can close the hearing. All right, it looks like it's 1:30. And by the way, I really appreciate that working out to just half an hour, surprisingly. So I will now open the hearing on Senate Bill, not 409, Senate Bill 422. And I see that Representative Rosenwald, Senator Rosenwald is here to introduce the bill.
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Cindy Rosenwald from Senate District 13, Nashua. And I am really happy to introduce Senate Bill 422 to add a dental benefit to adults enrolled in the Medicaid program. This bill will add New Hampshire to the list of 35 other states with an adult dental benefit for Medicaid. Not only will this benefit improve the health of the adult Medicaid population, it will also save money upstream in Medicaid on other health treatments. Right now, we spend millions of dollars on ER costs and emergency extractions, which is the only current adult benefit, along with other treatments to fight illnesses that come along from poor oral health. I would note that this bill is funded with most of the Centene settlement money directed to the benefit. And I know that this committee worked really hard on House Bill 103. The Senate bill's language is a little different on the Centene settlement because it includes language appropriating $2.4 million of the Centene settlement to repay CMS on the risk corridor program. And for details on exactly why we have to repay CMS, I would ask you to ask the department. But the department does need that $2.4 million for that purpose. And so I hope the committee will adopt this Senate's language and, as opposed to taking it to what you did in House Bill 103. The Senate Health Committee, which has House Bill 103, is also considering slightly different language on the cost sharing that the House put into House Bill 103. And that is to carve out preventive and diagnostic services from the cost sharing. This was suggested by the clinical dental community, and I think it makes sense to avoid financial barriers for patients that could inadvertently lead to unnecessarily increased cost of the program. I think Senator Bradley may have already shared his language with this committee, but I have a copy of it with me today if he hasn't. So those are the two biggest differences between the language in Senate Bill 422 and House Bill 103 as amended by the House. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're quite welcome. And I think our goal is to produce one bill that satisfies everybody. So we're not obviously not opposed to this because we already have passed it on the House floor. And so it's just a matter of trying to work together to make sure that our language relate is the same. So
right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator
Thank you.
Rosenwald. I will now call on Courtney Morin. Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good
My name-
afternoon. Courtney, I would just like to remind you that both the House and the Senate have passed a bill, and there's only a very few minor differences. So we don't need to go into the why.
Understood.
Okay, we all understand the why.
Thank you. So my name is Courtney Morin. I'm representing Northeast Delta Dental. I'm an actuary there, and I'm here on behalf of Tom Raffio, our president and CEO. First, I'd just like to say thank you to Senator Rosenwald, Representative Edwards, and Representative for all your work on this bill, on these two bills, to get them where they are today. As you heard, I won't go over why the bills are different, but I'll just say that ultimately, while we prefer the Senate bill at Northeast Delta Dental because of the additional benefits it provides, ultimately we'd be in support of either House Bill 103 or Senate Bill 422. And it's just time for us to get these adult dental benefits a reality. Any questions?
Are there any questions from anyone? Seeing none, thank you, Courtney. Appreciate it. I will now call Doug McNutt. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Oh, excuse me. You need to just press there you go. Thank you.
Is the red light what I need? Okay.
The red light's what you need.
Okay, very quickly, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Doug McNutt. I'm appearing today for the State Commission on Aging, which is a statutorily appointed, created commission that is created in order to review policies of interest to elders. Given that we looked at this bill and felt that it was important obviously for low-income older adults, and we support the bill, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. I will now call on Garth Corva. Thank you, sorry. If you would just hand those to Kevin and he'll take care of distribute. Yeah. We have very good service in this committee as opposed to some of the others.
Very impressed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Garth Corvo. I'm an attorney with the Bianco Professional Association, representing the New Hampshire Dental Society and its 1,100 members, including dentists and other dental professionals. No need to really go through this in detail, I think. For several years, the New Hampshire Dental Society has been on record working through the HB4 working group to help design this benefit. We've been incredibly pleased with the work you all have done in designing HB 103. The Dental Society supports both bills. We think that there are significant public health reasons and economic benefits that will result with the creation of an adult dental benefit. We also believe passing that will have a positive impact on dentist participation in Medicaid, which right now is very low. Part of that is because we only have children's Medicaid. And many of the policy changes that you all have worked on in House Bill 103, which you see in this bill, we are confident will increase that participation level. And it's not just Medicaid reimbursement rates, it's also care coordination, minimizing bureaucracy, that sort of thing. So we would just urge this committee, and we're quite confident that lawmakers from both branches will collaborate to expeditiously reach a final bill. If you have any questions for any of New Hampshire's dentists, we're certainly always willing to work with this committee and all lawmakers in finally getting this bill across the finish line. And again, we're very grateful for all the work you all have done in getting us to this impressive point.
Thank you. Are there any questions at all? Representative Weiler? Oops.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I remembered in 103 a talk about increasing people's personal responsibility in dental care. And I wonder what you think about having a copay, a small copay, and then if they don't show up at the dentist office, they owe the money anyway and won't get another appointment until they pay it.
Well, you have identified a very significant issue with what would ultimately face New Hampshire's dentists. Unlike, dentists are very much part of the healthcare landscape in our state. The difference between a doctor and a dentist, other than the work they do, is many doctors are part of a hospital system. If a patient doesn't show up, there's always someone coming. A dentist, for the most part, is a small business where a patient doesn't come in, they are losing money as a business. And so I would say that, whether or not paying them back, I'll leave that for you all. But you've identified possibly even the most important problem that dentists would encounter. And that's why we're encouraged by the care coordination aspect. That's really been what we've been advocating for in the working group that designed, the benefit before you. dentists, it is definitely a concern that they don't want to have empty chairs. They want patients in those chairs. And, we're confident in the bill before you now. We've worked very hard on it. With several of you, we're happy with the work this committee did on the House companion piece. In terms of the copay that you identified, the Dental Society doesn't take a particular position on that issue. We understand the policy reasons for doing it. We think that simply the fact that there could be an adult benefit will be reason enough for so many, tens of thousands of people to finally get the oral health care they need. I know that from what I've heard, there's been some discussion perhaps of removing the copay for preventative care. That I think I think the preventative care is just so important. Getting people in the door to get their mouths treated, make sure they don't get cavities, that sort of thing, oral health disease. I think that would be a beneficial change to make, perhaps leaving a copay for the remaining procedures, but to get people in the door for their checkups for the preventative care, perhaps not having it for that. We could see that as something you could do to improve the bill while still leaving the copay, perhaps for other procedures, Representative.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Are there Representative Bears?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Weiler asked the question that I was very interested in asking. Thank you.
Are there further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Glad you were able to be here today. Our next person is Lisa Bodine. Is that sort of right? Almost. Bowden? Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the New Hampshire House Finance Committee Division 3. For the record, my name is Lisa Bodwin. I am the Executive Director of ABLE New Hampshire, and I want to say on behalf of our members across the Granite State, allies, and the Board of Directors, we strongly encourage you to support SB 422. And more importantly, as others have suggested and as you all have acknowledged, we all need to commit, you all need to commit to passing a benefit program and funding it for an adult dental Medicaid benefit. We need to get this across the policy finish line, as Garth just said. It's imperative that you all continue to work together, the House and the Senate, to prevent pursuit of perfection from achieving the good. Let's just get this done. I'd like to also thank Representative Edwards, Representative Shapiro, Senator Rosenwald, and Senator Bradley. They have tirelessly worked to reach a compromise, making this important policy step forward a reality. ABLE New Hampshire's constituents, the disability community, are deeply encouraged to know that an adult dental Medicaid benefit program and its funding have very strong bipartisan support, and we are very grateful for the tireless work that has led us to this very day. ABLE has been deeply involved in moving this bill forward, and we know that SB 422 and HB 103 represent the combined efforts of many experts, elected officials, MCOs, public and private providers of oral health care, and most importantly, the consumers, right? We need to remember that people are going to be receiving this benefit who need it to have teeth so that they can have a job, because no employer wants to hire someone with a mouthful of dental caries. I just wanted to sum up by saying that Medicaid dental adult dental benefit is already state policy. We made that happen back in 2019 with HB 4. It has been ABLE's pleasure to work on that work group, and we are very grateful that a clear policy compromise and understanding will be reached by the New Hampshire House and the New Hampshire Senate. And I want to thank you all
very much for your commitment to an adult dental Medicaid benefit.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. You indicated you had written testimony. Okay, would you provide it to Kevin, please? Thank you. Okay. I think that is it. So, oh wait, no, it's not quite. Obviously, this bill has a lot of interest around the state. I have online, I have 141 people that support the bill. I have 4 opposed, and we have 28 comments. And as soon as Kevin arrives with the blue sheet, we'll thank you. Let's see. I have Jake Berry, New Futures in support. Don McKinney, New Hampshire Legal Assistance in support. Heather Carroll, New Hampshire AHA. Jennifer Smith, in favor. Kathy Corey Fox, Harbor Care, in favor. Holly Stevens, NAMI, in favor. Garth, I believe you testified. And I have Representative Gabby Grossman in favor. So I thank you all for attending this meeting, and I know that Division 3 is looking forward to work on this bill. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Division 1 will be convening at 2 o'clock in 212.
Tell them the bill number.
On 227 vote and on 371 work session.
Oh, for the other.
For the dental one.
Oh.
I just brought it. Just read it. It's video.
Okay.